Hello, it's Mark Atwood here, the Mark Atwood Show, Adventures in a Cosmic Suit. How are you? Good. Pleased to hear it. Sovereignty. What is this word sovereignty? Well, if you been watching this show for long enough, you'll have an idea. But we're going to talk about sovereignty today in a very interesting way related to equity. What's that? Is it how much you've got in your house after you've paid your fraudulent mortgage off? Well, no, not necessarily, but we're going to dig into that. But while I was lining up this show, I thought it'd be interesting to tell the viewers about a little experience that I had about 10, 12 years ago, because this word sovereignty was coming into my field. And by this point, I think, the first time I used any kind of natural law to get bailiffs off my land was about 2012, I think, in the UK, to do with the TV license. If you've never heard that story, there's a very interesting sentence that I practiced for weeks. And I was shaking by the time they came to the door, because it is quite nerve-wracking when you face the system down, and it's essential to take a step outside of the system. And the TV license is a good way to do it, because it's completely fraudulent. And what they do is they send these people to your door. And I knew this was going to happen because, and I've told this story before, but it was after Tony Blair talked about the digitization of the UK and all these towers went up everywhere. I think that was about 2009. And I knew then it was a bad thing. And it was one day, and I came back home from the office, and I walked through the front door, and I walked through the kids' playroom, and there was a TV on, and all five of my kids were small at the time, and they were all staring at the TV. And I walked past them and said, "Hi, kids," and they were all hypnotized. And I was like, "Kids, it's your dad." And I looked at the TV, and I was like, "Right, that's the end of that." I took the TV out of the room, cancelled the payments to the TV license, knew they were going to come. And when they did, I found this amazing guy whose name I always forget. He's passed on now, but he was on YouTube talking about this subject back in, 14, 15 years ago. John, somebody's going to tell me in the comments. I know that. And the sentence I learned was, "I refute your implied right of access to this property. Now please leave." And while I said it, I had my phone up. I said, "I'm filming you for YouTube." And the guy persisted. And I knew I shouldn't answer the question, "Are you Mr. Atwood?" because then you've entered a contract. Anyway, I did this sentence on him, and he turned around and he walked off the property. So then I followed him, and then I quoted subsection 16 of the 2005 Anti-Terrorism Act for the reason why I wouldn't pay that, even if I was the person he thought I was, because the BBC was complicit in 9/11 because they reported on Building 7 going down 25 minutes before it actually fell. And the guy said, "I'm not going to get anything out of you, am I?" And he drove off. This is after spending half an hour on the phone to his boss. It is a big step to take. And the thing that I'm going to pull up now is notes that I made about a podcast that I was going to start in 2015, but didn't. And look, you can see here, it's called the Sovereign Entrepreneur Podcast. Now, I spent about 10,000 quid at the time launching myself as the sovereign entrepreneur, because I was teaching people business and marketing at the time. And I thought, well, I've got to talk about sovereignty. And you can see here, I just pulled this document up. This was written in 2015. Sovereign Entrepreneur Podcast: money, health, education, energy, your mind, spirituality, misspelt as usual by me, because I'm always in a rush. And then I've got a list of people there that I wanted to get onto it. And what's interesting about this list is you can see John C. Parkin's there. Now, if you've ever watched me, if you watch my movie in America, if you watched me at live events, I do this thing called HIT therapy. And I learned that from John C. Parkin. And I actually did a pilot episode with him, and he wrote Fuck It Therapy. He's an amazing guy. I've not spoken to him in years, but look down this list. Who's at the bottom of the list? Elon Musk. That's good. I was thinking big. It's always good to think big. But today we're going to talk about equity and sovereignty and other things with an amazing man called Andrew Macdonald. Hi, Andrew.
Mark.
How are you doing?
Greetings. Doing fantastic. Pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, hope you didn't mind that introduction, but I was like, this thing's been going on for a while for me personally, and I'm no expert, but we've done our best with our healing center. Oh, sorry, that's the cat. The healing center here in the west of Ireland is set up as a private members association, and I don't know if you know about that healing center at all, but when we set it up, we've had over 850 franchise inquiries, and we had um, not a traditional franchise, just an easy way of describing what we wanted to do. And we had a meeting with like 50 people who wanted to do it. And then a friend of mine came over who's been teaching private members associations remedies within law using the Data Protection Act against, fraudulent claims on loans and all that kind of thing. And he said to us, he said, I've been teaching this for years and you're the first ones who've actually done it. And then we found that a lot of the people that wanted to open a healing center like ours, when it came to it, couldn't step across that line because and what I've learned is that process is a deeply spiritual process. It's not, you can't just copy and paste a document, send it off and think that's done, because you have to face it, and it's spiritual, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, the energies that you put into anything you're doing, whether it's this or healing, law or healing, they go together. So I loved your list that you just showed, because we're exactly on the same page. My wife is very, very intuitive. We both have both allopathic as well as alternative medicine backgrounds. I'm finishing my last course to a doctor of natural medicine. You were talking about saunas with the other Andy. We've got two saunas. We've got an infrared electric one, and we've got a wood burning one in the backyard here as well that we use. So very, very powerful medicine, very powerful remedy for healing. And my forte is not only in healing, but in helping people receive remedy when they're potentially being walked on by a three-letter agency or the government or a court, or you mentioned banking. Banks, everybody thinks banks loan money. They don't. They loan us our own credit that we created with this. Probably the most precious, powerful asset that you will ever own is your signature. So yes, extremely powerful. Just have to learn how to use it and use it properly, and in honor. You mentioned a couple of the acts and so forth, and in equity and talking about frequency and vibration, all of their rules, codes, statutes, ordinances, I consider those, and equity considers those, a lower vibration, where equity is just a higher frequency, a higher vibration, to where it supersedes all of those lower vibration man written laws, where equity comes from, where rights are granted to us by God, our creator. And the only way to allow their rules, their laws, to supersede our God inherent laws, our powers, rights, is to volunteer, or allow them, or to contract or recontract with them. So that's what that gentleman knocking on your door was trying to do. He wasn't going to get anything out of you. He was just trying to say a box of donuts, and you handled it correctly. You told him what he could do with those box of donuts. In equity, we handle the knock at the doors a little bit differently, where we just simply ask the questions that would compel the performance. Are you, someone next door, are you Andrew Macdonald? And my reply would be, do I know you? Instead of yes or no, we answer questions with a question. Okay. Under what authority are you here at my door? Did you not see that no trespassing sign at the gate? All these kinds of things. Are you making a legal decision to, that you're allowed to be here and that I'm under your jurisdiction? Is that not practicing law without a license? Even though we know there's no license to practice law, it's just a club membership. So yes, ask the questions that compel the performance that you wish to happen. And when a lot of people we talk to, they're getting something in the mail from some taxing authority, government, bank, and the biggest mistake people make with that is just letting it sit. Because I use several law books here: Burton's Legal Thesaurus, Black's Law Dictionary, Levine's Manual of Commercial Law, and you would not imagine how many times the word acquiescence is used in these books. The governments and everybody, all the agencies use this hundreds of thousands of times a day around the world. and you standing silent on anything, whether someone puts a piece of paper in front of your face or says something, if you acquiesce or stand silent to it, you might as well have just signed a consent form that whatever they're saying is true and you agree with it and you're going to obey it. So don't stand silent. Have something to say all the time. And with equity, it's going to be, a question. And we have to learn this and we have to figure it out. And ladies usually have a lot more wit than us guys. I had to learn the wit, and even then, I usually joke my wife got more wit in her little pinky I have in my whole body. But hey, it's definitely a learned skill.
Yeah, my audience, a lot of them are on top of this really well, and we're doing our best. My business partner in the healing center, Gary's far more advanced with it than me because, one of the issues I found is that, like you said, you've got all these law books and you're referencing those. I mean, that's a certain skill to be able to want to go into that, and you must be driven to do this. So how did you get to this? What's your story? How did you,
Sure.
because that's, you didn't go to university and study this, did you?
No, I didn't. I'm not an attorney or a lawyer. Um, Jeepers, I'm a former firefighter paramedic in the early 80s as a rookie firefighter, trying to fill out tax forms and wondering, why am I having to do this and, pay taxes to a government when they're printing all the money that they need or want. So that was the beginning of it. And then kind of left the fire department early after about 13 years and because of politics on the department. And my wife and I went to work for a doctor down in Florida, where we moved from we're in Colorado now. But he was an MD surgeon who got brain cancer and they couldn't get it. So he found a way to cure his own brain cancer alternatively, and got so upset with, allopathic medicine that he took 2 years off, took every naturopathic course he could, and opened up a practice doing strictly alternative medicine. Well, as a paramedic, I was working in the back with him doing therapies. My wife ran the front office, and anytime you're in that field, since alternative medicine people like us are under attack all the time, the alternative law side just naturally comes with it. And so, we got into this space and started realizing it and doing the research, got involved in groups here in Colorado once we moved here. And one thing led to another where, we stopped, paying taxes because he knew it was voluntary. The problem is contracts. Our rights are granted to us, but the contracts that we've entered into through our life is what supersedes those rights. Well, we didn't realize that. We were in what I call patriot warfare mode and fighting. I'm not a taxpayer. You can't do this. Stacks of, registered mail and green cards, return receipts and everything to the IRS. Well, they showed us, they sued us with the Department of Justice in federal court in Denver, Colorado. And they we were, again, patriot warfare stuff. We didn't know this equity thing at the time, but we lost obviously in federal court. And next thing you know, our couple of homes we had, one property up in the mountains, seized with by federal marshals with M16 rifles on their shoulders. Not pointing
Whoa.
at us or anything like that, but
That's
they made their presence known, and they had a locksmith out there changing the locks and seized the properties. So we had heard of equity. We traveled, down to Katy, Texas, to learn from a guy named Rourke, who was teaching pre-1933 equity, still does to my understanding. The problem with pre-1933 equity is when they took away the gold and the silver around the world, the true money, the laws had to change. And that's when countries around the world started merging the procedures of equity and common law with their Admiralty Maritime statutory laws, because the true common law, 1215.org, 1215 common law, as well as equity, can supersedes their lower court rulings. So anyway, learned this equity thing from several people around the country here, and put the pieces of the puzzle together. We wound up receiving, still, after they seized everything, we still had 7-figure liens on us from the IRS. After 8 months of getting into honor with them, that doesn't mean sending them a check, but getting into honor with stopping arguing, giving them the commercial energy with this to discharge the debts, we received certificates of releases of liens. In between all of that, because we had lost anything, we were on the verge of homelessness, broke.
I was going to say this must have been very stressful.
Oh, I'm sure it took years off our life. I mean, I'm 62 years old, and
No, that is seriously stressful. What you've just brushed over it, but that's hardcore.
It is very hardcore. And you mentioned you're shaking in your knees. Well, all in between all this, because I just lost everything for my wife and I, starting life over in our early 50s. Some person down in Georgia said, "Hey, I look for abandoned homes, and eventually a judge, do an administrative process. And eventually a judge will give you title to it." So we did that in our little town here. And next thing I know, we did administrative process, mailings, clerk and recorder recordings. Next thing you know, I've got cops knocking on my door with a warrant for my arrest, 3 felonies, 2 misdemeanors, burglary, criminal trespass, recording false documents. I was facing 12 years in state prison. I was learning equity at the time, so I knew just not to go in and argue. All I did was go into these hearings and ask questions. Never testified, never argued. And I would ask questions like, Judge, why does case number such and such have a QSIP number associated with it? Doesn't QSIP stand for Community and Uniform Security Identification Procedures? Judge, are you attempting to administer the estate without my permission? How does that not make you an executor de Santor? He would try to appoint an attorney for me. I said, Judge, why would I want an attorney? Don't attorneys simply atone for the dead? Because they represent the fiction, not you. Okay, now you're surety for that fiction, that all caps name, but it's not yours, it's theirs. I asked about the bonds, and I said, Judge, I went down to the clerk's office before the hearing today, and they said that all they have is the appearance bond. They didn't have copies of the bid performance or payment bonds. Do you have those? And these are all questions that they don't want to answer. They're not supposed to be talking about QSIPs and bonds and so forth. So what I did was I compelled the performance that I wanted to hear. I was really nervous, shaking in my knees, the first couple of hearings. The third hearing, I finally got my act together and went in there with confidence, still nervous. Fourth hearing, same thing. Fifth hearing, they were supposed to pick a jury and start jury trial. Well, the prosecutor came up to me before the hearing, gave me a really dirty look and said, "We're not going to prosecute this case." Turned around. When the case got called, she started to explain to the judge why they were not going to prosecute. The judge shut her down, would not let her say anything, and said, "This case is hereby dismissed. And here's the important part: all bonds are hereby discharged in this matter." I knew I was onto something at that point. So diving deeper into equity, we had the IRS taken care of, Department of Justice taken care of, this court hearing, 2 huge experiences where we had success with not arguing, not fighting, giving them the commercial energy to discharge these matters. And then I started helping people, and it is just off from there. We've helped hundreds of people around the world, receive remedy, including there in Ireland, UK, Netherlands, here in the States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Bulgaria. Have someone in Bulgaria in the current class that we're teaching right now. So this is spreading. It works. Nothing's 100%. There's no silver bullet. There's no magic fairy dust to sprinkle on your documents before you mail them out. As you mentioned, it's going to take. I teach spiritual energy, putting positive energy into what you're doing, and the likelihood of the outcome is a good outcome is much higher. So.
It is so powerful, the grip the system has. Even yesterday, I was having a conversation with a friend who was saying, "Oh no, we have to do this. We have to pay this license because they come and knock at the door and then they take you to prison." And I went, "No, they don't." And if they did, because people don't understand, they run like a business. So when
corporations.
They're all corporations, and so a business runs on profit and loss. So when you get a parking ticket, when we were getting parking tickets 15 years ago in the UK, we used to take great pleasure. Even my kids would rip them off and then stick them on a fence, and people would walk past tutting at us letting the kids do this, like, "Oh," and then then we went through the process of getting the letters, and the letters change color over time. So you start with it's a normal letter, then it's a red letter, and then it's all in black. And I remember putting a meme out 15 years ago saying the world is run on red ink and yellow paint, because those two things seem to trigger responses in most people that mean they don't have to enforce stuff.
Yeah.
They just have a bit of paint on the road, or they have a bit of ink and the letter. And most people, like my mother's a great example. She gets terrified of any kind of nasty letter. I mean, literally terrified. And that's a massive journey to be able to step through that. And we did a course talking about private members associations with people that already had existing businesses, and it was like, I think we'd done 4 or 5 hours of teaching stuff, and then this lovely lady said, "Can I ask a question?" I said, "Sure. What's the question?" She went, "What do I tell my accountant?" And my answer was, "You don't tell the accountant anything. It's private." But that's when I realized
services are no longer needed.
well, that's when I realized how spiritual it is. And it's great to hear you tell that story, because there isn't, nobody teaches anybody this stuff in the system, of course, because it's, against the system. But tell me about these courses that you teach. How did you get to that, and what format does that take, and what kind of people should do it? Because there's a lot of, I've got people on benefits watching this show. I've got multimillionaires watching this show. Some people that own businesses. Some people, when people ask me, should I set up a PMA instead of a limited company? I say, well, yes, I think you should, but you've got to do the work yourself. I can't tell you how to do it. How do you cross that bridge?
Sure. Going back to the colors of the citations and the parking tickets, I mean, even Black's Law Dictionary, one of the books I use, calls that colorable. In other words, it's fake, it's fiend, it's only there because they only use it, and it only has power because of the badge that they wear, or the threats that they have, or the power they have to send some 3-letter agency after you. And so yes, the course we teach is about you have a sign behind you, we're always free. It's about freedom, and people can take that to whatever level they want. I'm preparing a course right now, the outline, because we have a live off grid in the mountains. We grow food, solar, wind power, and so forth. Escaping the matrix, to operate without bank accounts, without government issued credentials. I don't carry government credentials, don't have them on our vehicles, but I still get through TSA and fly when I need to. I can teach that. So we teach about freedom, but the biggest thing is I want people to live their lives the way they want. I'm not into status correction. We did tons of that, in this federal court case, and it all got labeled vexatious and frivolous and nonsensical. So, I'm not telling people not to do a status correction. I'm just saying, if you do, you probably should know this equity law stuff, so that if it's ever attacked, which is a high possibility, you know how to defend it, without arguing, without trying to, use their codes, rules, regulations, because most of the time those are copyrighted anyway. The Uniform Commercial Code is their copyrighted law. And when people write UCC 1-308 above their signature, well, UCC 1-308 tells us what to write instead of UCC 1-308 above our signatures. So don't use their copyrighted laws. So yeah, as I was helping people and having huge successes, starting to help people, I said, well, I got with a gentleman with a large firm, and we started doing a class together, and it just exploded, from there. So I teach a 12-week equity course. And what it basically teaches is how to be in honor in all aspects of your life without ever being walked on by anyone or any entity. We teach the power of the pen, the power of your signature. We teach a little bit of law and banking out of these books. It's nothing that I came up with, only the experiences and the successes that we've had. But all I use is their books. Nothing. The only other books by somebody else I use is Levine's Manual on Commercial Law, he was a New York CPA attorney back in the early 1900s, once these CPAs and attorneys realized the money changed around the world, they took away the gold and the silver around the world, they realized we couldn't pay for anything anymore. All we can do is discharge the debt. How can you pay for something with a debt instrument? Okay, which is the pound, the euro, the US dollar, Canadian dollar, Australian dollar. It's all fiat currency, so you can't pay for anything. It only discharges debts. Well, when they did that, they had to give us a remedy, and equity knows that remedy. It's we don't create money, we don't do bills of exchange. That's creating money, and that can get people into trouble. And I talk to people all the time who are or have getting into trouble doing that. But banks don't loan money. But when they put a statement in front of you, of court, a bank, a taxing authority, anything government related, puts a statement in front of you and it says you owe 5,000 euro, they've given you the 5,000 euro to pay what we cannot pay because there's no lawful money on the planet. They took away that, in their early 1900s, 1933, most of the time around the country, with final nails in the coffins sometime some years later. Here it was 1970, 71 with Nixon, 59 in Australia. I don't remember when it was, when they completely took everybody off the gold standard in the UK.
It was
But
1924, and it was Winston Churchill when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer.
wow. Okay. So it started there. Just like equity. I mean, equity comes a couple thousand years old and started probably in the times of Rome. And then, stupid little story I like to tell with that is, picture someone riding a horse and, some Roman soldier comes up to him and says, you were going 5 miles over the speed limit on your horse, and goes to court and tries to explain what happened, the defendant. And the judge says, sir, you were speeding, pay the fine or go to jail. Well, the kings wanted their subjects to be treated fairly. So the kings developed appointed chancellors in chancery courts, to where a chancellor could look at the whole story and overrule the lower court's ruling. And so, this gentleman, the defendant, would go ask for redress at a chancery court. And the chancellor could say, yeah, the reason the horse was speeding because someone just blew off some new Chinese fireworks behind the horse and it took off, and that's why it was speeding. So, case dismissed, and you don't have to pay the fine. You're free to go. That's equity. It's justice by fair dealing is what the definition is, and it can overrule, supersede all of their codes, rules, statutes. It does take someone, in order to receive equity, it takes someone to bring equity, and it takes an equitable person. It can't be in dishonor, and expect equity to work. So this is what we do. This is what we teach. We have a website. I'm sure you'll put that in the notes, freedomwithequity.com, freedomwithequity.com. And if you join as a private member there, you can schedule a 15-minute phone call with me at no other cost other than, we want you to become a private member. It's cancelable anytime. So it's $4.99 US dollars to have a 15-minute call with me and see inside. There's an ebook of our story on inside, newsletters and things like that. The $4.99 a month does not get you into any of the courses. Those are obviously more expensive, but these are life-changing courses. We teach a equity course, a trust PMA ministry course, and like I said, getting ready to release a escaping the matrix course, how to live without banks, without government interventions, without having to live in a teepee in the woods or under a rock someplace as well. So just how to escape from the matrix, which is not necessary with equity. I teach people, live your life the way you want to. Just know equity, so that if anything ever comes your way, or you decide to bring equity to a commercial matter, which everything's commercial, equity will have your back, from that parking ticket to traffic citation, all the way up to criminal charges from like similar to what I had, to foreclosures. Anything banking. Nobody should be losing their home to a foreclosure for property or council taxes, or not taking their mortgage. Your home was paid for at closing when you signed that promissory note. It was deposited in a transaction deposit as cash at the Treasury, and account was opened, and the Treasury sent funds to the bank or title company to pay for your home. but your signature created that commercial energy, created those funds. And so your house was paid for at closing. The problem is you signed some other contract. We call some places call it mortgage documents, deeds of trust, to where if you don't send them a certain amount every month, they're gonna, put you out in the street. Well, we have a remedy for that. And, again, we give them the commercial energy to discharge the debt. And then we know how to compel that performance if they dishonor that commercial energy. It's all commerce, it's all commercial. And it's using, their system to receive remedy without arguing, testifying, using their codes, rules, regulations. No, we use commercial energy of your signature, of your pen, not to create money. Only banks are allowed to do that. I have to be very careful not to do that, but to give them the discharge capability to make that debt go away and be satisfied.
Yeah, it's very powerful information, and it does. It's 12-week course, you say.
It is. Yep. It's right now it's again it's going to be late for you in the UK, and we have people in the UK and Netherlands and Ireland in the courses, but it's 6 p.m. Mountain Time, Denver time, here on Thursday evenings, and runs for two and a half to sometimes 3 hours. Just depends on how many questions there are and how many people are asking questions. Because I want to make sure everybody's questions are answered. We teach you everything: the why, the how, exactly how to write documents, non-negotiable notices and things like that, and how to operate, like I said, in honor in all aspects of your life without being walked on. And that's takes that 1,000-pound gorilla off of so many people's shoulders. Plus, since we're talking peaceful remedies here, it resonates with a lot more people too, because people have been through the ringer trying what I call the patriot warfare modes, the secure party creditor process, the status corrections, the affidavits. We don't do any of that in equity. Everything that they would put in front of your face or say to you falls in, by legal definition, under the definition of either an offer or presentment. And equity just tells us how to handle either one of those. An offer is something, that's not really threatening. A credit card statement, it's going to be an offer. They're putting that money in front of you. They just want you to write a check. Well, if you look in the legal definition of voucher, which is at the bottom of the credit card statement with the little dotted line with a pair of scissors, the first two words in the definition of voucher is a receipt. They're telling you it's the money. We just have to know how to properly process it, and that's what we're helping people learn. So yeah, very peaceful. It's no arguing, no testifying. It's if someone dishonors our equity, we ask the questions that compel the performance that we wish to happen. And like I said, there's no way for their laws, what they're doing. The word corruption is way overused out there, I believe, at YouTube University. But obviously it's there. But a lot of the times we just have to look in the mirror and see, okay, if what we did in the past isn't working, what do we need to do? And this is just a good answer to a lot of things that may not have worked for people in the past. And I'm not saying this is the only remedy out there. It's
No.
just the best that we found in 26 plus years being in this space.
Well, the more I hear terminology like compel performance, when I first heard Nash say that, I was like, what does he mean, compel performance? And a lot of it is jargon that people have to get their heads around. There'll be people watching this who are leaving in the comments saying they didn't understand that. Well, firstly, if you're watching this, don't forget there's a pause and rewind button on YouTube. You can go back and watch it again. Also, there's going to be a link to Andrew's website below. And while you were talking just there, I joined myself, and so I can just show people that I've just logged into the member resources place where all of these things like the courses are there, and you've got the client. I've just literally opened this, so do you want to talk through this, Andrew?
Sure. When you're first in course offerings, you can go to the classes. You can go to schedule a consultation button up there and schedule a 15-minute call with me if you like. There's the ebook there. There's an online support group that you can join just for people who are not in any of the courses there, but may have questions that maybe they don't want to do a phone call, but they can ask questions there. So yes, and we have a course for the United States course is for pretty much everybody around the world, because there's only two different things between any country and what we do here in the States and Canada and Australia. I do have a separate course for Australia just because there's just a lot of people down there interested in this and equity. And obviously Australia is a Commonwealth of England. So again, there's two different things in our courses that different. Is one's a mailing form. When you go to the post office to mail something, there's some kind of receipt that you get. And we don't talk registered mail or anything. It's much less expensive. And the other form is a form that we teach to if someone's employed by a corporation, to have that employer stop taking taxes out of the fruits of their labor, i.e. their paycheck. Otherwise, the notices that I teach, other than maybe having to change the language. I talked to somebody in Germany yesterday. Our students in Netherlands probably going to leave things in English and let the Dutch people, the Dutch government, translate it if they want to, up to them. So however you want to do it, it's equity is going to work in any country around the world, as long as they have a constitution and human rights. Maybe not so much in North Korea. I haven't talked to anybody in North Korea yet, but pretty much, many other countries around the world. We have a student in Bulgaria right now who's also from the UK. So just fantastic opportunity to learn this. It's not inexpensive to do this, but it again is life-changing. We were almost, like I said, on the verge of homeless when I needed to travel around the country. We sold stuff that wasn't taken. We borrowed. We got sponsors to help us get this education, to travel around the United States, talk to the people I needed to talk to put all these pieces of the puzzle together, and that's what we offer. So yeah, it might be a little bit of a stretch for some people. It works for anybody. Doesn't matter whether they're on social benefits or if they're multimillionaires. We've got students that are and people who have come to us in all walks of life. So anybody with a desire of freedom, and that's the magic word, is freedom. And a peaceful revolution. Thinking of a title like you were thinking of new titles for your stuff, was equity revolution or peaceful equity revolution, because our vision here is to change the consciousness of the planet to a more peaceful but fair system. Banking, courts, government, and how do we do this? Is we change it within ourselves. If someone were to integrate this equity into our hearts and our souls and stop fighting, stop arguing. I tell a little stupid, if I have a couple minutes here, I tell a stupid little story during COVID where my wife and I were at dinner. Across the parking lot was the cell phone store, Cricket Wireless cell phone store, where we had our contract. So I went in to take care of my cell phone bill for that month because it was due. And the manager literally ran to me at the door and said, "You have to leave." I said, "Why?" "I just need to take care of my cell phone." You don't have a mask on. You have to leave. And my background's in medicine. I've been through hundreds and hundreds of masks, so I'm not anti-mask, but I knew the issue going on with COVID. So I looked to her and I said, "Are you a doctor?" She said, "No." I said, "Are you an attorney?" She said, "No." I said, "Are you attempting to make a medical legal decision for me that I'm one required to wear a mask?" She said, "No, I've got a child at home and I want to keep my job." I said, "What would happen if you had to spend 5 years in prison for violating my rights under color and attempting to make a legal decision for me?" Very calm, very slight tone, nice tone of voice. And she let me take care of my cell phone bill. So that's when you mentioned compelling performance. That's what I mean by compelling the performance that you wish to happen by being calm, and asking the questions that would compel the performance that you wish to have in any situation. And we live this every day, whether it's at the post office, the grocery store, wherever. We don't get mad. We ask questions.
You see, you should have taught me this 5 years ago, because I left a restaurant where they tried to make me wear a mask. After a few glasses of wine, turned around to all these people that were working there and saying, and they're all from Eastern European. I said, "Your grandparents fought for your freedom. You should be ashamed of yourself," and then got kicked out and barred. So I didn't exactly compel
That
performance, but
that used to me too. That used to be me too. That until I learned this equity and our lives changed. And again, it's not just about every day, but it's, like I said, taxes are voluntary around the world. The
well,
equity scale.
can I ask you about that? Because there's a subject, right? So, for example, my daughter got a job last year, and they took in Ireland they took the tax at source. So the wages were tiny for 2 or 3 months, and then you might get a bit of money back because they were taxing them at the highest rate. How does somebody like that? How does a teenager here starting out in the world? And I'm sure that they do this just to force the idea of taxes upon them. I think my first job in the military, I think the taxes were taken at source as well. How do you get past that? How do you what do we need to teach those kids? Uh, is there a remedy for that?
Absolutely. When you go get a job at an employer, they're going to have you fill out paperwork. And somewhere in there is going to be a contract that you give them permission to take the fruits of your labor out of your check in the form of taxes. And so they either find a job that they're not going to do that, or they're in almost every country has some sort of form or tax declaration to where it doesn't go to the taxing authority, it stays with the employer because that's where the contract starts. And that for the United States here is called the W8BEN. The Canada, it's I can't remember the name of it. In Australia, it's called the tax declaration form, and it says right down there, don't send this to the ATO, the Australian Taxing Authority. Don't send this to the IRS. Don't send this to the CRA. Don't send this to any taxing authorities around the world. It stays with the employer. Well, what if you were to write zero on there? I don't recommend writing exempt, but or somewhere, we do this with every country that we have students in. We figure out what that equivalent to the W8BEN here is and submit that. And what the W8BEN says is basically says that you're foreign to the taxing jurisdiction. You're here, you're foreign to Washington, D.C. You're not an artificial entity, even though that all caps name is what they're paying, and we're the surety for that name. There's no separating yourself from that name. Some people try to use colons and dashes and so forth. If you're using that all caps name, you've become the surety for it, which is the surety by definition is the one liable to pay. So when that all caps name gets charged, the living person, because you're using that name under what they call usufruct, that's a legal word, where you're using somebody else's property for your benefit. And so, yeah, there's going to be a form in any country to either give to the employer or some type of tax declaration form where you can inform them not to take taxes out of the check. So, that's what we teach. As far as the children go, I mean, I've had homeschool moms and dads have their 17, 18-year-olds take this course, and imagine learning this at that age.
I know.
How to be free for your whole life, how to be in honor without ever being walked on at age 16, 17, or 18 years old. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, you're the guy that's chopped down the jungle trees to make the path for everybody else. So you've got all the scars. But
that was just part of our spiritual journey to be here,
yeah,
and that's how my wife and I look at it. Is yes, was it fun going through that? No, but I wouldn't be here talking to you right now, Mark, if we hadn't. So it
precisely.
was part of our spiritual journey to go through that, and that's what our goal is vision is to keep other people from having to go through that. And sometimes those spiritual journeys take over even this. This isn't 100%. Again, no fairy dust, no magic, wands or anything like that. You do have to learn this and integrate it in order to make it work. But I teach you how to do that.
Well, that's fantastic. Are your courses like they start on a certain date and finish at a certain date, or are they evergreen? So if you join, you can just go straight onto a course. How does it work?
Excellent question. We start the 12-week course every 14 to 16 weeks, but people can join at any time because everything's recorded.
Yeah.
And if someone joins, like we're on session 8 this week in the current equity course, if someone wants to join, tomorrow, we give you access to those previous 7 or 8 videos. Once you catch up, then you can join the live courses. We've got over 300 people in the current course equity telegram right now. So there's a huge support system. Most of those are alumni, because this isn't a one-time course. Once you're in the course, you're in it for life. As long as I keep breathing, I'll keep teaching this. And so, once you're in, it's a lifetime course. Because what happens is, there's hundreds or thousands of people doing this around the world right now.
Yeah.
So the governments are trying to come up with ways to get around this, because they know there's no money. They know that equity supersedes what they're doing. So I call it, they're moving the cheese.
Yeah.
And what I do is I keep my fingers on the pulse of what's going on out there in the equity world. And if something needs to change in a notice, then we do it. Something huge that we just learned in the last couple of months is, every account number that you all have, whether it's a tax number, a bank account, driver's license number, pretty much anything, it's been securitized. This is how the governments are making their billions and trillions, in that it's being traded on the open markets. It's become a security. Well, generally accepted accounting principles, we learned from somebody, say that once a debt has been securitized, then all debtor and creditor positions no longer exist. So, think of the questions you can ask a bank, or if the taxing authority has a lien on you. That lien, a number, is being traded. Not only are they making millions on the back end of that, but now they're trying to get you to discharge it with your fruits of your labor. They go away. The IRS, the CRA, the ATO, the taxing authorities around the world will eventually go away. It's going to be a process, no matter what. But when you go to the mailbox and you pull something out and it's from one of them, at least now you know what to do with it.
There were, about 5 years ago, there was a website going around where you could put in your national, I can't remember what it's called in the UK. National, it's like a social security number. I can't remember. There's a word, national insurance number.
National insurance.
And I put my number in, and it said that my birth certificate had been traded thousands of times, and I was currently owed about $370 million, and I lost that website. Does that sound crazy to you? Is that?
No, they've taken that website down. It was Liberty something. I don't remember the name of it, but yeah, that's not available anymore. These days, to get that information, you have to have here it's called a Series 7 broker license, in order to access the QSIP numbers. But anywhere around the world, yes, someone in the UK or Ireland can, who has the proper licenses, can access those numbers and see what funds those securities are being traded under these days. And so, yeah, every court case number has a QSIP, is being traded. So, this is how the court systems make money. The judges, you don't hear about, at least here or any place I've heard of, you don't hear about they need to raise taxes to give the judges raises or build a new courthouse. No, they're making billions of pounds and euros, on the securities of the court cases that are on the open market being traded. So again, that was one of the things I asked my judge is, why does this case have a QSIP number? Now I ask, are you continuing this matter for your financial benefit, the financial benefit of some third party? Ask a judge that. They're going to turn red, because that's exactly what's happening.
Could you just explain that a bit deeper? How does a case number in a court case, how does that get commoditized, and how do they make money out of that?
So, and then, again, this is my understanding. I'm not any expert in this, but a clerk of a court is part of the banker too. And if you look up the legal definition of bench, in other words, court bench, one of the synonyms for it is bank. So one of the hats a judge wears or magistrate wears is the banker. The clerk is the banker. They take that court case. They assign a judge to it. Assignment, by legal definition, passes title. So a judge has a court case. They have legal title to that court case, as if it were a trust. Okay.
Right.
And the clerk, whatever the process is, around the world, the clerk takes that court case and sends it to a clearinghouse, which is some kind of a bank. Here, the mortgages is MERS. I don't know, Mortgage Electronic Registry System. Whether the courts use that or some other commercial bank, they send that to it. An account is open and goes through a process to go onto the stock market to be traded on the open market. My understanding is from the people who receive, get QSIPs, is that some remainderment of those investments goes back to the judge's retirement accounts. Here they call it 801k, where a lot of people have 401ks. The judges have 801ks. But there's also documents in our understanding that the judges and or the clerks submit directly to the taxing authorities to receive direct income as well. Here they call them 1099s, 1099A, 1099Cs. I don't know what they call them. They call them different things around the world. So yes, they're receiving direct income as well as remainderment to their retirement, and that's our understanding of how that works, to the best of my knowledge.
And do all of those judges and all of those clerks worldwide in the courts, do they all know this?
At least at the upper levels, I'm sure most or all the judges understand it. The clerks, it may just be the head clerk that does. Yes, the elected one, or the one that put into the main position of the court administrator or clerk of court. Yes, because they have to be doing something, sending those numbers somewhere to get securitized. And when I asked for the bonds, for my case, criminal case, from the clerk, they turned white, and the guy had to go back, and it was gone like 5 minutes, and came back and says, and when I asked for the bid, performance, and payment bonds, he goes, "We don't have those here." So they know the system is not totally correct. And that's one of the ways we compel performance. It's not always all paperwork. Someone's in foreclosure. I'll send someone down to the what they call the public trustee, or the person who works with the bank as the liaison to kick somebody out into the streets. And we've gone and we've had to give them some script suggestions for them to go use, and we've had them quit and leave their office crying, because they know they're involved in something that's really not good for the people, that no one should be living in a refrigerator box under a bridge because they didn't pay their property taxes or their mortgage. So because it's all about control. It's about that thumb being over us. And yeah, like you said, they're working on teaching it to the children at an early age.
You mentioned earlier the word attorney means, what was it again?
Oh, a torn. I used the word torn. So yeah, attorneys, a torn for the dead. A torn means to do something for somebody else, or for something else. So that's what they're doing. Attorneys, if you were to hire an attorney, what are you telling the court? First of all, you're telling a judge or a magistrate that you're incompetent to handle your own affairs, and that attorney is not representing you. Why would you need to be represented? No, we present ourselves as living sentient beings. Okay, moral sentient beings. So the attorney is representing that fiction, because there's case law around the world that says fictions can only deal with fictions, and what is government is a fiction, so they can only deal with fiction. So they had to create a fiction for us, i.e. the birth certificate, or Colby's certificate of live birth, to that's why they call it the delivery room at the hospitals, where mom delivers the baby from her jurisdiction over to the state's jurisdiction with the application of the birth certificate. So yeah, that birth certificate, we may hold equitable title to that, but the state is the ones who created it. They hold legal title to it. That's why the state of, or whatever jurisdiction is at the top of your birth certificate. That's who created it. It's a title. So with any title, there's two levels of ownership: legal title and equitable title. By using that all caps name, whether it's on the birth certificate or not really doesn't matter. That's still a bond, like you mentioned. It's a security that's been securitized. But by using that all caps name on your driver's license, your checking accounts, credit cards, national insurance number, all of these things have made us surety, the accommodation party, which is the surety, which is the one liable to pay. So again, that's why I said there's no separating yourself from that all caps name. I did. When I was just learning equity when I got arrested, and I brought the birth certificate and said, "Judge, here's the defendant." That went nowhere. So don't do that. You're the surety for that name. So, but there's remedy there, you know, and that is to bring the equity. And if, you know, the judges don't like it, then we ask them the questions that put them on notice that they're to have equity before their eyes above all else. Equity is available in every fiction, in any fiction, and everything they do is fiction because, again, they can only deal with the fictions, and equity supersedes what they're trying to do. The only way for your equity to lose is for you to allow it by silence, by volunteering, or by contract or recontract. Otherwise, we're free.
Yeah. I was just wondering, you know, with that word attorney in the States, over here, that word doesn't get used. It's a solicitor or a lawyer. Do you know much about those meanings and why we don't use those words here?
Same thing in Australia. Solicitor is a lower lawyer. They have certain duties. They're usually not going to represent fictions in court. They do a lot more paperwork, you know, title transfers and things. Then there's a lawyer or barrister that they use. Those are more people higher end who they're gonna represent the fictions in court, or people in courts. And so yes, it's basically just different levels. Lawyer, attorney, barrister, those are all considered. Solicitor, at least in Australia, and my understanding is, you know, they're usually people who need things notarized. If there's not a notary available, they can go to a solicitor. So they're a higher end notary, which, again, notaries have the same, around the world, have the same power in many respects as a judge. Here in the States, you know, notaries used to have the embossing seals. Many of the states here, the Secretary of States who are over the notaries have outlawed those because of the power in a seal. So, you know, just more evidence. It really doesn't matter with the equity that we're using. We accept their offers and presentments and properly return them to them for settlement and closure of whatever they're trying to do, whether there's a debt or whether it's performance. The building inspector knocks on your door because you put a shed on your property without asking their permission. Well, equity can accept their offer, return it to them, and compel them to go away and leave you alone, just like what you did, the story you told. Or if they put a piece of paper in front of your face that says you owe a certain amount of money, you know, they've given you all the money to pay, but we cannot pay because there's no lawful money on the planet. There's only legal tender, fiat currency. So they had to give us a remedy, and there is remedy in there. You may have to compel it, but that's the world we live in right now.
Well, I'm glad that also you mentioned on the website, and you mentioned earlier about, and I touched on it, that, you know, there will be some comments under this video of people saying, "Oh, my friend tried that and ended up in prison," or "That doesn't work," or, you know, "Yeah, I mean, my view is that that's because they did what I said earlier. You can't just copy and paste a thing and send it off and think you've done it all. What's your view on that? Because there's also been, do you remember David Lester Straight? Is that his name? Do you remember him? Because he passed on.
Been on the phone with them.
Yeah,
before he passed away.
I really wanted to meet him. I don't know if he's gone or not.
Yeah, he passed away last year.
Yeah, that's really sad because I wanted him to see the end of this because he put a lot of work in, didn't he? He was a good guy, wasn't he?
He was. What I teach is 180 degrees opposite of what he teaches. But yes, God rest his soul. You know, again, he was more about declarations and repudiation and things like that, where, you know, we're bringing more of an equitable thing, not arguing, not testifying, not status correction. So it is quite different, but yeah, this is why this resonates so well with people, because it is so peaceful. I don't remember what you asked me before talking about David, though.
Oh no, I was talking about the fact that, you know, at the beginning of COVID, for example, I did shows about this. Lots of other people did shows about this. Lots of people set themselves up teaching people this, and how, you know, and I learned myself through being part of something that was teaching some of it, that without going through the spiritual process. That's when I truly understood it, that you have to go through this. I mean, you went through it the hard way. My little way at the door with the bailiff was quite hard and led me down this path, which is why I was going to do a podcast 10, 11 years ago about this subject. And then all sorts of things happened to me. But, you know, a lot of the reason I mention it is because there will be people watching this now who say, well, it doesn't work. And my answer is that it's because they haven't done the spiritual work. And I was just checking
Yeah.
you concurred with
So
that.
that's a huge part of it. The other part is that yes, you need to integrate this into your heart and your soul. The biggest people make mistakes with this. That the biggest mistake people make with this is standing silent. And again, you know, we rarely have people going to court when they're bringing equity to a matter that's not in a court situation yet. Can happen. You know, equity doesn't hold a gun to their head and say, do this or else. It compels that performance. So if, you know, I tell people if the equity is not compelling the performance you want to have, ask better questions. You know, equity tells us we have a duty to inquire. So what have we done? I've got the art of inquiry pretty much down. So, you know, I would ask the question to a bank is, you know, how can you be, does a bank's record reflect that this loan number has been securitized, and according to generally accepted accounting principles, that once derecognized, that there's no longer any debtor creditor positions. How can you, are you attempting to violate rights under color of law by charging me twice or something to that effect? So, you know, come up with the questions, and if they're not working, ask better questions. But the biggest mistake is standing silent, especially if you're in a courtroom and the judge or magistrate says something. It could be the biggest freaking lie in the world, but if you stand silent, you just signed a consent form that it was true. So that's, you know, that's the biggest reason why people don't have success with this, or they just think the paperwork's magic. You know, I hate templates. I don't use templates. I teach people how to write their own notices. So that's huge. You know, templates is what helped us lose everything with a secure party creditor process that we thought, because I was desperate. I was out there looking for something to bring us a remedy. And, you know, we didn't know equity. Didn't find anybody that knew equity at the time. And so that's what we went with. And yeah, it's templates and, you know, accepted for value. There's no such thing as accepted for value. That's a Patriot made up phrase. Banks use the word accepted, okay, not accepted for value. When you write a check to somebody, their bank doesn't write accepted for value on it. They stamp it accepted or run it through a computer that accepts it and sends it back to the originating bank. So, you know, we have to be careful in not where we're going, who you're listening to about this and with this, and you know, make sure you're learning from the right people, and then stay the path. Pretty much the only way to lose with equity is to give up.
And in your experience in, I don't know, the last decade or 5 years, are you seeing this movement grow? And can you see, I know you said earlier it's a case of perseverance and it's a process, but are you seeing that accelerate in the world with what you're doing?
Absolutely. Success stories with the people in our forum, almost can't keep up with them. I'm hearing almost every day this success stories, from credit cards to court cases. We had somebody a couple weeks ago, a student wrote me, and this had happened beforehand, but yeah, success story. I got a judgment against me on from a credit card, but the judgment amount was $0. So, you know, what is that telling us? It's telling us that, you know, the judges, the magistrates, they have a duty to keep us in their box, in their admiralty maritime jurisdiction, to protect the emergencies that Winston Churchill took away the silver and the gold, where FDR took away the gold and the silver here in 33. They have a duty to protect that emergency. They're bankers. They're going to protect their own. But this equity, you know, allowed them to give statutory reasons for them to dismiss the case. I'll never have any reason. I'll never know the reason why my judge dismissed the case, other than likely he made an ex parte phone call to the prosecutor and said, this guy's giving too much information, get rid of him. So, you know, and the only reason we have to even do that is because they're dishonoring the equity that we bring forth anyway. But again, they have a duty to keep us in their box. So equity can now help you ask the questions to break free from that box.
Finally, you know, when you said about the guys with the M16s and everything else, I mean, that is a big issue. You've got big guys, badges. I mean, they've not got guns. Well, some of them have, but you know, generally here compared to the States, there's no guns. And people are terrified of them. What do you say to those guys?
I basically told them, because I was there when they were in season 1 of the properties, and I basically told them they were Satan's minions, and they didn't like that. But I didn't know what to say. I really didn't know what to say at the time. You know, they were giving me the opportunity to grab a few last things. We knew that it was likely coming, because again, we were in that patriot warfare mode. We weren't in equity mode at the time. And so, you know, they let me go in and grab some things and stuff before they seized. So yeah, didn't say a whole lot, but you know what equity would tell us is to ask the questions. But the likelihood of that happening is almost nil once you're in honor with that taxing authority. You know, we've had another little story is we had you know, someone who's been with us for a couple of years, and the IRS was just on him constantly. And you know, he's trying to figure out, you know, he was saying, why is this taking so long? It's been like 2 years in. And I said, you know, go through your files, try to find something. There has to be a contract that they're using to continue coming after you like this. So he goes through his files and he says, yeah, I found 2 documents where I signed to give the IRS an extension of time to assess taxes upon me. So we rescission that, which is an equitable remedy. Rescission is the unmaking of a contract from the beginning, not merely a termination. It's an equitable remedy. So we rescission that. Around that time, they had also given him a date of when they were going to come seize his land, his property. That date, I mean, that was like 8 months ago. Nothing happened. And they're pretty much going silent now with the IRS. So yeah, it's a process. But again, we're not arguing. We're giving them the commercial energy. The taxing authorities are the largest debt collectors on the planet. They know there's no lawful money on the planet. So that's how we received the certificates of releases of liens, because we gave them the commercial energy honorably to discharge the debt. We didn't argue it. We didn't, stopped arguing at least, you know, after 15 years, the first 15 years in this space, we were, you know, patriot warfare people that I call. And once we stopped that, everything changed. That 1,000-pound gorilla came off our shoulders. Go to the mailbox, something from the IRS. You know, now we know how to handle it. The stress is gone.
Amazing.
So,
the stress is gone is the perfect sentence to end this chat on. Thank you very much, Andrew.
You're welcome, Mark. It was a pleasure and honor to be here with you.
Oh, it was a real pleasure to listen to you. Great work that you're doing. Give my love and regards to your wife, and thank you everybody for watching. The link is freedomwithequity.com.
Yes.
The link's below this video. Share this information with anybody you think needs it. Thank you, Andrew, again, and God bless everybody.
Blessings. My pleasure.